The first phone call I ever made in a crisis was to my mother. The last phone call she ever needed to make in hers was to me. But the woman standing between me and the door that morning, she made sure my 82-year-old mom almost died alone in her own house. This is the day I stopped being a husband and started being my mother's son again. That line hits different when you live it. I stood in my kitchen that Wednesday morning, January 14th, 7:42 a.m., staring at the coffee maker as the last drops fell into the pot, like they were personally offended the day had started. The air smelled like burnt toast from yesterday, and the faint metallic tang of the old pipes. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. I snatched it up on the second ring before my brain even caught up. Wesley. Her voice came out thin, almost brittle, nothing like the steel I'd grown up hearing. This was the woman who buried my dad 12 years ago, on a raw November Wednesday, and still had a hot meal waiting for whoever showed up on Sunday. The woman who sold her second car to cover the funeral without ever mentioning it to me. The woman who never once called me complaining in all those years. Mom, you okay? I didn't want to bother you. 82 years old, and still apologizing for taking up oxygen. I was already moving toward the hallway, socks sliding on the cold tile, heart kicking up like it knew something my head hadn't processed yet. Just tight, and my left arm keeps going numb. She stopped, like even saying the words cost her. Mom, I'm coming. Right now. I hung up and stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds. The kind of pause where the world narrows to the sound of your own pulse. My Silverado was still at Kowalski's, with a dead alternator. Eve's silver CRV sat fat and shiny in the driveway, full tank from Monday. Upstairs, the shower was running that long 30-minute production she did every morning like the bathroom was a runway. Ave. Water kept falling. Ava. It shut off. Long pause. Then her voice, sharp and already annoyed, before she even knew why. What? I took the stairs 2 at a time. Voice steady, even though my stomach was doing flips. I need to borrow your car. Mom's having chest pains. Left arm's numb. I'm taking her to St. Francis. I'll be right back. Silence. Not thinking silence. Decided silence. 30 seconds later, she appeared at the top of the stairs, towel wrapped around her head like a crown, robe cinched tight, face blank as fresh drywall. Wesley, I can't today. Eve, my mom is having chest pains. Her left arm. I heard you. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Call an ambulance? She doesn't like them? Tough. I have dinner with Joanne and the girls tonight. Full day of work. I'm not spending it in a hospital waiting room. I stood at the bottom of those stairs, boots still unlaced, and felt something cold settle in my chest. The audacity wasn't even the worst part. It was how calm she said it. Like an 82-year-old woman's heart sending up distress flares was just another item on her to-do list that didn't fit the schedule. Eve. My voice came out quieter than I meant. Her arm is going numb. She stopped halfway back to the bedroom, turned just enough for me to see the look. Not worry, not guilt. Inconvenience. Pure, unfiltered inconvenience. She's your mother, Wesley. Not mine. A beat. Figure it out. The door clicked shut. Soft, gentle, no slam. A slam would have meant she cared enough to be angry. This was worse. This was nothing. I stood there another moment, the hallway light buzzing overhead, the smell of her expensive body wash drifting down the stairs like it was mocking me. Then I pulled out my phone. Clinton Webb lived 4 houses down. Retired union electrician, 71, drove the same old Honda Civic he'd babied for years. The kind of guy who still gave firm handshakes and showed up. He'd sat front row at my dad's funeral. He picked up on the first ring. Wes? What's up, brother? Clinton, I need a favor. Mom's having chest pains. Truck's in the shop. Eve's car isn't available. Can you run us to St. Francis? Not even half a breath. Give me 4 minutes. I'll pull up front. No questions. No conditions. No. Let me check my calendar. 4 minutes. I called Mom right back. I'm coming. Clinton's driving. Just unlock the door and sit down, you hear me? Sit down. Wesley, I really don't want to make a fuss. Mom, a tiny laugh almost. Okay, baby. Clinton rolled up in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I counted everyone. Mom was already waiting on her porch in that good blue coat, small hand clutching the railing, looking like she was dressed for church instead of the ER. She kept apologizing the whole ride. "I'm sorry to drag you out, Clinton. It's nothing. I was just watching the news anyway." "Was it any good?" he asked. "Nothing ever is." She actually laughed. I stared out the window at the gray Hartford morning, bare trees whipping past, and felt two things crash into each other at once: pure gratitude for the man driving, and something colder, quieter, sharper for the woman back home, still in her robe. I didn't examine it. Not yet. I just let it sit there like ice in my gut. St. Francis was its usual controlled chaos. We got Mom into a room fast. Nurse Beverly, broad shoulders, seen it all, eyes moved like she'd done this dance 1,000 times. Dr. Raymond Cole came in calm, deliberate, voice steady. "Mrs. Watson, we're running an EKG and checking enzymes. At your age, we don't mess around with these symptoms." Mom looked at me, eyes asking the question she wouldn't voice. I squeezed her hand. "Do whatever he says, Mom." She nodded, then reached up and touched my face with those small, warm hands that had packed my lunches and waited up for me every single night I came home late. "You came," she said, simple as breathing, like part of her had wondered if I actually would. That one nearly broke me right there in the sterile room that smelled like antiseptic and old worry. "Mom, I'll always come." She patted my cheek twice, lay back, and closed her eyes. I sat in that plastic waiting room chair for 2 hours and 40 minutes, bad fluorescent lights humming, game show playing silently on the wall TV. Worst coffee I've ever tasted from a machine that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. Eve never texted. Not once. Not even, "Is she okay?" At 11:04, Dr. Cole found me. Face serious but measured. Mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but her body was waving a red flag. "We're keeping her for observation, adjusting meds. She's stable." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Can I see her?" "Give us 20 minutes to get her settled." I sat back down, elbows on knees, staring at the scuffed linoleum. "Figure it out," Eve had said. While my mother's heart was misfiring, she was probably picking an outfit for dinner with the girls. "Yeah, I figured it out all right." I called Clinton, who'd been waiting in the parking lot the whole damn time. "She's stable." "Thank God," he said, and he meant every syllable. "Clinton, thank you." "Wes, that's what people do." "Some people." I stayed with Mom until 4. We watched half a game show with the sound on this time. She beat me twice at some ridiculous word game she invented on the spot, using hospital equipment and state capitals. Sharp as ever. At 3:47, she took my hand again. Voice different, now stronger. The one she used when she really meant business. "Wesley." "Yeah, Mom." Eve didn't come. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. She had dinner plans. Just my name. That's all she needed. I looked at her 82. Blue coat folded neatly over the chair, eyes still clear as spring water. "She went to dinner, Mom, with her friends." The words dropped heavy in that quiet room. Mom didn't gasp, didn't raise her voice, didn't say a single bad word about Eve. She just nodded slowly, turned toward the window where the afternoon light painted the Hartford skyline gold, and tired. Something shifted across her face. Not anger, not shock. A decision. I had no idea that single sentence was about to rewrite 11 years of marriage and destroy everything Eve thought she had coming to her. I kissed her forehead at 4:02 and walked out into the cold Connecticut air. Clinton picked me up again. We drove home in comfortable silence. Oak leaves swirling across Blue Hills Avenue, like the world was finally shedding dead weight. Somewhere on that drive, I realized I wasn't angry at Eve anymore. I was done. Thursday morning hit like a slow freight train. I woke up at 6:58, eyes snapping open before the alarm even thought about buzzing. The left side of the bed, my side, for 11 damn years, still felt too big, like I was still unconsciously leaving room for someone who never scooted over. The sheets carried that faint, lavender detergent smell Eve always picked, but it did nothing to loosen the knot sitting heavy in my chest. Eve was dead asleep beside me, hair fanned across the pillow, breathing slow and steady, like the world hadn't cracked open 2 days ago. The woman could sleep through a damn verdict. I slipped out of bed without a sound, bare feet hitting the cold hardwood that creaked in all the familiar spots. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled like last night's dinner grease and the faint metallic tang from the old faucet. I made coffee anyway, loud machine grinding and hissing on purpose. No guilt, not even a little. She chose dinner with the girls while my mother's left arm went numb. She could survive the coffee maker. I sat at the kitchen table, second cup warming my hands, watching gray January light creep through the window over the sink, phone face down on the wood. I flipped it over, nothing from the hospital. Good. No news at 7 in the morning was the best kind. My mind kept drifting back to Mom in that bed small against the white sheets, good blue coat folded neat like she'd dressed up for the occasion of almost dying. The way she reached up, touched my face with those paper-soft hands and said, "You came," like she'd half expected me not to. 2 words, 82 years of showing up, compressed into 2 words. My coffee went cold while I sat there, feeling my throat tighten all over again. Footsteps on the stairs. Eve appeared in her robe, hair still messy from sleep, glanced at me, then the gurgling machine, then back at me. "You made coffee." "Every morning for 11 years, I said, voice flat. Shocked, it's still surprising. She poured herself a cup, leaned against the counter. The silence that followed was the married people kind, thick, loaded, waiting for someone to pull the pin. She finally did. "How's Rebecca?" Not Mom, not even your mom. Just Rebecca. Like my mother was some distant coworker she'd once met at a company picnic and immediately forgotten. "Stable," I said. "Mild cardiac event, keeping her another day." She repeated it slow, tasting the words like cheap wine. Another beat of that heavy quiet. I asked about her dinner, mostly to watch her reaction. She blinked once, caught it then. "It was fine. Careful. Measured. Wesley, I want you to know yesterday was really complicated for me." Complicated. The word landed like a wet rag. Your mother-in-law's heart was throwing warning shots, and you were passing the breadbasket at a restaurant. But sure, complicated. Wesley. Eve. I said her name the exact same way Mom had said mine the night before. Flat, final, no room for debate. She stopped mid-sentence. "I'm not doing this right now." "I know. I heard you the first time. Yesterday. At the bottom of the stairs." I stood, rinsed my mug in the sink, the water rushing loud in the quiet house. Grabbed my phone, jacket, keys spare set too, because the truck was still at Kowalski's. Headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "To see my mother." I didn't look back. Clinton was already waiting when I stepped outside. No questions, no opinions. Just the low hum of the old country station on the radio and one hand loose on the wheel. That kind of friendship doesn't need words. We parked at St. Francis at 8:40. He cleared his throat. "I'll be here." "Clinton, man, you don't have to." "Wes." He looked at me over his glasses, steady as ever. "I'll be here." Some people show up. You write their names down somewhere permanent. Mom was sitting up when I walked into the room, color back in her cheeks, thin morning voice gone. She'd refused the hospital gown after the first night, respected the hell out of that. Reading glasses perched on her nose, crossword book open in her lap. The air smelled like weak hospital coffee and the faint antiseptic that clings to everything. 7 letters, she said the second I crossed the threshold. Betrayal. I stopped dead in the doorway. She looked up over her glasses, straightest face I'd ever seen. "For the crossword, Wesley." I laughed so hard the nurse poked her head in from the hallway. Dropped into the plastic chair beside her bed, still chuckling. "Perfect." She counted the boxes, wrote it in, nodded with deep satisfaction. "You always were the smart one." "I'm your only child, Mom. And still the smart one." We sat like that for a while, easy quiet. The kind that only grows between people who've loved each other long enough they don't have to fill every gap. She finished 2 more clues while I drank the terrible hospital coffee and didn't complain once. Being in that room with her, even on hard chairs that made my back ache, felt exactly where I was supposed to be. Then she closed the book, set it on the bedside table, folded her hands neat in her lap. Here we go. I want to call Paul this morning. Paul Logan, the attorney who'd handled Dad's estate and drawn up her will 6 years back. Sharp, precise, the rare kind who listens more than he talks. I kept my tone careful. Okay, I've been thinking, she said, since last night. Mom, you don't have to. Wesley Andrew Watson. Full name, all 3 parts. I hadn't heard that since I was 17 and rolled in 40 minutes past curfew. Do not finish that sentence. I shut my mouth. She looked at me with those clear, steady eyes. Morning light through the window was softer today, painting the room in pale gold and making her look exactly like herself. The woman who packed lunches, waited up, sold a car without a word, and kept Sunday dinners going for 34 years on Maplewood Drive. My mother. The most constant thing I'd ever known. I've worked my whole life, she said quietly. Your father and I scrimped and saved, so what we built would mean something, so it would go somewhere that mattered. Pause. To people who showed up. I didn't say a word. Eve didn't show up, Wesley. I know, not just yesterday. She picked up the crossword book again, just to hold it. Not at your father's funeral repast. Not when I had the hip surgery and needed rides to therapy. Not at Christmas 2 years ago, when I had that flu. And not yesterday when my heart was failing. She went to dinner. Every example landed like a stone dropped in still water, slow, heavy, sinking deep. She was right. She'd always been right, and I'd spent years making excuses. Mom, I'm not angry, she said, voice calm, steady as a hand on a Bible. I'm just accurate. She reached for her phone on the bedside table, pulled out a small folded paper from her glasses case. Phone number written in her neat, deliberate handwriting, Mr. Paul Logan. Direct line. She'd come prepared. My mother never made impulsive moves. This had been brewing longer than one hospital stay. You want me to step out? She considered it a second. No, stay. One word. And everything inside me went still and grateful. She dialed at 9:22. He picked up on the second ring. Paul Logan. Paul, it's Rebecca Watson. Hope I'm not catching you too early. Mrs. Watson. His voice warmed right away. Never too early for you. How are you? I'm in the hospital, actually, St. Francis. Brief pause. Serious? Serious enough to make me think clearly. Even from a hospital bed the morning after a cardiac event, her voice carried that quiet dignity, the kind you can't fake, built over 82 years of doing the right thing even when it cost her. Paul, I need to update my documents. The will specifically. Professional silence on his end. Absorbing. Of course. Today, if possible. I have some very specific changes in mind. I can be there by 2. Perfect. She glanced at me. My son will be here. Very good, Mrs. Watson. See you at 2. She hung up, set the phone down, picked the crossword right back up, just like that. Like she hadn't just rewritten 11 years of assumptions in one calm phone call. Like she hadn't just loved me in the most permanent way a mother possibly could. I sat there a moment, throat tight, eyes steady. Mom, my voice came out quieter than I meant. You don't have to do this for me. She didn't look up from the puzzle, filled in another letter, calm and deliberate. I'm not doing it for you, Wesley. I'm doing it because I've earned the right to decide where my life's work goes. And I've decided. She looked up over her glasses. Any other questions? I had about 40. Asked 0. No, ma'am. Good. Back to the puzzle. Now go find me something edible from that cafeteria. Whatever they've been bringing tastes like a decision someone regretted. For just 1 second, I looked at her, this small, sharp, magnificent woman in her own nightgown, in a sterile Hartford hospital room, filling in crossword answers, like the world owed her nothing, and she owed it everything. I thought, I've spent 53 years trying to be worthy of her. I hope I'm getting there. Mr. Paul Logan arrived at 1:58, sharp charcoal suit, leather briefcase, silver haircut, firm handshake, the kind that said he understood the weight of the room. He sat across from Mom with a yellow legal pad and a pen that probably cost more than my alternator. I stayed in the corner, quiet witness. Their conversation lasted 47 minutes. I won't put every word here. Some things deserve privacy. But I will tell you this. By the time he clicked that pen shut and tucked the pad away, the document Eve had been silently banking on for 11 years of marriage had been rewritten fundamentally, irrevocably, legally. The house on Maplewood Drive that Mom owned free and clear since 2009? Mine. The investment accounts Dad spent 30 years building? Mine. The jewelry, the furniture, the 1,967 Ford Mustang Dad restored with his own hands, the one that still smelled like him on warm days when you opened the garage? Mine. And $20,000 earmarked for the Hartford Animal Shelter because Mom had volunteered there every third Saturday for 11 years. Because that's exactly the kind of woman she was. Eve's name appeared exactly 0 times. When Logan stood to leave, he shook my hand again at the door. "Your mother," he said quietly, glancing back at her, already back to her crossword, completely unbothered, "is one of the sharpest people I've met in 31 years of practice." I looked at her too. "Yeah," I said. "I know. I've always known." I left the hospital at 4:30. Clinton was waiting. I climbed in, closed the door. He read my face the way old friends do, not digging, just making sure I was still standing. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "Everything's exactly the way it should be." He nodded, put the car in drive. We pulled out of St. Francis and headed back toward Asylum Avenue. My phone stayed silent in my pocket the whole ride. Eve hadn't called once all day. She had no idea, absolutely no idea. But she would. Friday morning smelled like motor oil and fresh rubber at Kowalski's Auto on Flatbush Street. I stood at the counter at 8:14, pen scratching across the invoice, while Danny Kowalski slid the keys across the scratched Formica. New alternator, oil change, he threw in. Because our kids played Little League together, that's just what neighbors do around here. He even tossed in a fresh set of wiper blades I never asked for. My phone buzzed in my jacket. "Eve." I let it ring out. Not some calculated move. Not yet. I simply had 0 words that would land right. I finished signing, shook Danny's grease-stained hand, and stepped out into the sharp Hartford morning. Cold air bit my face, honest and clean, the kind that wakes you up whether you want it or not. I climbed into the truck, started the engine, let it idle while my breath fogged the windshield. Mom, I needed to get her home to Maplewood Drive where she belonged, settled in her own kitchen with her chamomile tea and her crossword book, dignity wrapped around her like that good blue coat. Today wasn't about Eve. Today wasn't about the buzzing phone or the missed calls piling up. Today was about bringing my mother home. The phone buzzed again, then a third time, 4th, 5th. Something was shifting. I pulled out of the lot and pointed the truck towards St. Francis. She was ready when I got there at 8:53. Blue coat on, small overnight bag packed neat on her lap. Beverly the nurse walked beside her, while another one pushed the mandatory wheelchair. Hospital rules. Non-negotiable. Mom had already argued the point and lost with her usual grace. The second those automatic doors whooshed open, she stood up, steady on her feet. "I can walk to my son's truck," she announced loud enough for the whole pickup lane to hear. "I had a cardiac event, not a personality removal." Beverly let out a real laugh, the warm kind that crinkles the eyes. She took Mom's hand in both of hers for a long moment. "You take care of yourself, Mrs. Watson." "I always do, baby." Mom squeezed back. "You're a good one. Don't let anybody tell you different." Beverly pressed her lips together like she was fighting tears, then nodded and stepped back. Even leaving a hospital, my mother had a way of making people feel seen. I held the passenger door open. She climbed in slow but on her own terms that independence was the last thing she'd ever hand over, and we both knew it. I closed the door, walked around, got in. Her eyes flicked to my phone, lighting up in the cup holder every 30 seconds. Eve. Ava. 11 missed calls before 9 in the morning. Mom said nothing, just clicked her seatbelt and gave a faint smile out the window, the kind that said she'd already made her peace with whatever came next. I took her home to Maplewood Drive first. The white colonial with green shutters sat quiet at the end of the block, exactly as it always had. Oak tree in the front yard, mostly bare now. Porch swept clean, faded welcome mat, still saying home in letters worn soft by decades of footsteps. I noticed it today, like it was brand new. Inside, I made her tea exactly the way she liked, chamomile bags, steeped 4 minutes. No more, no less. Checked the thermostat, checked the fridge, read every new medication label out loud while she sat at the old kitchen table, hands wrapped around the warm mug. That same table where she'd baked every birthday cake, helped me through algebra, and held my hand the morning after Dad died without needing to say a single word. "Wesley, this one's for the blood pressure, twice a day with food." She watched me from across the table, eyes steady. "Sit down." I sat. She reached over and covered my hand with both of hers, small, warm, the same hands that packed my lunches, buttoned my coat, waved from the bleachers at every Little League game, and held mine tight in the back of Clinton's car 2 days ago. These hands had shown up for me for 53 years straight. "I need you to hear me," she said. "I'm listening, Mom. What I did with the will, I didn't do it to punish Eve." Her eyes stayed clear, no anger, no bitterness. Just plain truth delivered warm and unmovable. "I did it because it was right. Your father and I built something together. It belongs with someone who understands what building something together actually means." She squeezed once. "You understand that?" I did. I felt it down in my bones. "And Wesley," her voice dropped just a notch, more deliberate, "I need you to think about your life, not the money, not any of this." She waved a hand at nothing and everything. "About whether you're happy, about whether you're loved the way you deserve to be loved." She held my gaze a long moment. "Because you've been showing up alone for a very long time, baby, and a man like you, a man who shows up, deserves someone standing right beside him when he does." The kitchen went dead still. Outside on Maplewood Drive, a car rolled past slow. The refrigerator hummed low. Down the block, a dog barked twice, then went quiet. Every word she said rang true. My throat tightened hard. Eyes burned at the corners. I didn't look away. "Yeah," I said, voice rough and quiet and completely honest. "I know, Mom." She nodded once, slow, like that was exactly the answer she needed. Then she patted my hand twice, same gentle way she'd patted my cheek in the hospital, and let go. "Good." She took a sip of tea, set the mug down. "Now, are you going to answer that phone or not?" My phone was buzzing on the table between us. "Eve, call number 29. I glanced at it, then at Mom. She raised one eyebrow. I picked it up, turned it face down, and let it vibrate against the wood until it stopped. "Not yet," I said. The corner of her mouth twitched, just barely. "Not yet," she repeated softly, tasting the patience in it. "I'll check on you tonight," I told her, "and tomorrow morning, and every morning after that." She waved a hand. "I know you will. I mean it, Mom. Wesley." She looked at me over her glasses. She'd slipped them back on without me noticing. "I know you mean it. You have always meant it." I left Maplewood Drive at 1:15 p.m. Drove back to Asylum Avenue, parked behind Eve's silver CRV, and sat in my truck for a full minute. 34 missed calls. 34. I finally went inside. Eve was perched on the edge of the living room couch in her work clothes, both hands gripping her phone like it was the only solid thing left in the room. She looked up the second the door opened. Eyes raw, sleepless. The careful mask she usually wore had cracked wide open, and underneath was someone who'd clearly spent the whole day realizing the size of what she'd done. "Good." A quiet voice in the back of my head whispered, "Stay right there a while, Wesley." She stood up fast. "I've been calling you all day." "I know." I set my keys on the hook by the door. Let the memory of Wednesday night sit in my chest for 1 second, Mom, in that hospital bed with monitors beeping. IV in her arm, doctor. Cole's calm face explaining the warning her body had sent. While Eve passed the bread basket at dinner, then I looked straight at my wife. "Did you know?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "About the will. Did you know she was going to—" "No, Wesley. I didn't know." She pressed her fingers to her mouth, trying to pull the composure back together. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, tighter, but fear ran through every syllable like a live wire. Paul Logan's office called to confirm the changes were filed, and Wesley, do you understand what that means? Everything we've been expecting. Eve. My voice stayed calm, steady as it had ever been. I understand exactly what it means. Then talk to her. The mask slipped again. Ask her to reconsider. Tell her it was a misunderstanding, that I was going to come to the hospital. You just what? She stopped. I took one step closer, not angry, not loud, just fully present in a way I hadn't been in years, because I finally had nothing left to protect. You just had dinner with Joanne and the girls, while my mother was in a hospital bed having a cardiac event, while I sat in a plastic chair drinking machine coffee under fluorescent lights. I paused, while Clinton Webb sat in that parking lot for 3 hours. Because that's what people do. The color drained from her face slow, like someone pulled a plug. Rebecca made her decision. I said, the same way you made yours clearly, deliberately, and without asking anyone's permission. Wesley, please. She has spent 82 years showing up. For my father, for me, for every single person she ever loved. She has never once chosen dinner over someone who needed her. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She finally stopped expecting everyone else to do the same. The living room went completely silent. Eve looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time in years, and I watched something deeper than fear move across her face. The exact moment she understood, she hadn't just lost money or a house. She'd lost me. The man standing in front of her now, calm, clear-eyed, keys already in hand, heart finally at peace, was not the same man who stood at the bottom of those stairs on Wednesday, still hoping she'd say yes. That man was gone. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down. Mom's name glowing on the screen. She looked back up at me, eyes wide, a flicker of something that might have been hope. I looked at her for exactly 1 second and felt the last thread I'd been holding for 11 years finally go slack. Not with anger, with release. I picked up my keys from the hook. I'm going to check on my mother. I opened the front door. Cold Hartford air hit me clean, honest, completely free. Oh, I said, turning back one last time. Eve stood frozen in the middle of the living room, phone in hand. Mom's name still lit up. 38 calls worth of consequences carved into every line of her face. I looked at her for exactly 1 second and felt nothing but clarity. You should probably answer that. I closed the door behind me and exhaled the kind of deep breath that comes from somewhere you didn't even know you'd been holding. Stood on that porch for just a moment. January air stung my cheeks. Something settled over me I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. Not the hot rush of finally snapping. Just quiet, unmistakable clarity. I had not been married for 11 years. I had been enduring for 11 years. There's a difference. And standing there with Mom's voice still warm in my ears and Eve's face burned into my mind, I finally saw my life exactly as it was. The hospital didn't plant the seed. Watching my mother lie in that bed with her heart sending up flares, while her daughter-in-law passed the breadbasket at dinner, didn't start anything. It burned the whole field down and showed me exactly what had been growing there the entire time. I walked to my truck, started the engine. Old country song came on low, something Dad used to hum on Saturday mornings in the garage. I let it play. I didn't make any big decisions that night except one. I was not going back into that house. Not that night. And somewhere deep down, where a man knows things before he's ready to say them out loud, I already understood it wasn't just that night. I thought the worst part was already over. I was wrong. Because the very next morning my phone started blowing up, and the person calling wasn't Eve. It was my mother. Loyalty and love deserve a legacy. If you've ever had the ground shift under you and finally seen the truth staring back, drop it in the comments. I'm still sitting with this one. Hit like if you're locked in. Subscribe for more raw stories like this. I'll see you on the next one.